asking.
Okay, so we ended off last time. We ended off last time with a discussion. We were going through muksa, and we talked about the various categories of muksa, and then we got to another category of muksa called Nolad, which means just born, brand new. Meaning it came into being, it went from a state of where we could not halachically consider it here, in this dimension of ours, before Shabbos, and somehow it becomes fully formed, it becomes what it is on Shabbos. Okay? Nolad. The term Nolad refers to an item or substance that either evolved into existence on Shabbos or Yom Tov, or assumed a new form that it did not have earlier. The classic example is an egg laid on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Meaning the eggs existed moments before on some form, like in the chicken, right? In the hen. But it's only in our world in a way that we can interact with it meaningfully when it was laid on Shabbos. So that's called Nolad. It might be said that Nolad is the antithesis of Muchan. Meaning we understood that all these various things, meaning a vessel that needs to be Muchan, needs to be set aside in order to be used on Shabbos, and therefore something that only came to being on Shabbos by definition could not have been reserved for Shabbos use before Shabbos. An item that is Nolad is almost by definition lacking in preparedness for any Shabbos or Yom Tov use, simply because it did not exist before Shabbos or Yom Tov. So now there's two subcategories of Nolad. There's something called absolute Nolad, Nolad Gamor. And then there's Ke'ein Nolad, which is quasi-Nolad. So we have absolute Nolad and quasi-Nolad. Nolad Gamor and Ke'ein Nolad. What's absolute Nolad? The term Nolad Gamor refers to an object or substance that evolved from where nothing existed before, spontaneous generation, or from something completely dissimilar. Thus, any object or substance that metamorphosed and assumed a totally new form is muksa on Shabbos as well as Yom Tov. Here are some examples of Nolad Gamor. A freshly laid egg is muksa, may not be eaten because its emergence on Shabbos or Yom Tov constitutes a totally new creation. It is therefore prohibited. So this doesn't mean that you can't eat it. It means you can't eat it on Shabbos or Yom Tov. You can save it till after Shabbos. But it was not mukhan. So fresh milk from a cow. Milk produced by a cow is an entirely new creation. The milk is classified as Nolad Gamor if the cow is milked on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Even where the milking itself does not involve any malacha prohibition, like a non-Jew milked his own cow for his own use, and there was leftovers that were made available to you, the milk is nevertheless muksa and may not be used until after Shabbos or Yom Tov, just by virtue of the fact that it didn't exist before Shabbos. Fresh milk is also muksa, simply because it came from a muksa source, because the cow is muksa. Now, this is a whole discussion that might come up in Dush because people have dairy farms. They need to operate, they need to milk the cows on Shabbos, just for the welfare of the cows, to alleviate pain. So there's a whole questions of procedures, how halachically, how to care for your dairy cows on Shabbos. But normally, cows are muksa, and their milk is nolad, and their milk is muksa. And milking is also possibly because of dash. So when the time comes, we'll talk about all those things. But milk is a classic example. Milk that was milked on Shabbos is nolad. Sap extracted from a tree, like maple syrup. So sap that's secreted from trees on Shabbos or Yom Tov, like naturally, a person didn't even try to initiate or farm it, right? In the springtime, when it naturally appears, it's classified also in the category of absolute Nolad, Nolad Gamor. The sap was previously absorbed in the tree as part of it and is now considered a newly created entity. Wood that burned to ash. Wood or coal that has burned and has been reduced to ashes is muksa because the ash is halachically regarded as a new creation and is therefore classified as nolad. Therefore, a matchstick used to light candles on Yom Tov that has burned itself out after having been put down and is completely scorched is muksa and may not be handled. I bet you a lot of people don't know that. You know, we light a lot of candles on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, rather. You know, you're supposed to. And people use matches. And you put the matches down, and if the match is already a piece of coal, it becomes nolad, and therefore may not be handled unless you want to throw it in the trash. Okay, so that's examples of nolad gamor. Then we have something.
What would that allow you to handle it?
You want to dispose of. You're allowed to handle things that are muksa to dispose of them. So, for example, we said trash is muksa machmat, not machmat mius, it's machmat skufo. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out here. What's the first category? I think it's machmat kufa. Here. Yeah. So, muksa machmas gufo includes any object or substance that has no intrinsic function and is not a designated utensil, vessel, or tool. Such objects are naturally set apart because they have no designated use. Debris, rocks, stones, bricks, gravel, pebbles, sand, twigs, grass clippings, soil, loose screws, bolts, bricks, money, trash, fruit peels, shells, pits, detached windows, doors, lumber, construction materials, and edible foods, including raw potatoes, frozen meat, rice, beans, peas, pasta, flour, animals, insects, corpse, broken appliances, utensils, dishes, glass, and other items that are no longer functional. Note, shards of broken glass, china, or any other hazardous materials may be swept away and removed. However, once safely discarded, they may not be handled. Obviously, trash, you can take out the trash and dispose of it, even though normally, if you were not interested in disposing of it, you cannot play with it or move it because it's muksa machmas kufo. Now, obviously, l'tzorech mekomo, you need the space, you may take it out. And you will find that when we get to the malacha of kosher, which involves tying permanent knots or untying, right? Meaning the discussion of tying and untying, you'll see that there's discussions about when you want to throw out the trash, the various halachic views on being able to tie the trash back. Meaning, is it considered a kesher shel kayama if you're not interested, you're throwing it out. So maybe you can make a regular knot when you take out your trash. It's actually a discussion, but it's best not to. Yes?
Glass breaks on Shabbos.
Yeah.
Is broken glass muksa?
It's muksa to play with, it's not muksa to clear and get rid of.
No, but besides getting rid of,
Yeah,
that glass was designated for Shabbos. Shabbos came in.
Yeah, but that glass no
they were
longer-
using it for drinking.
But that glass
Now in the middle of the day, Shabbos, it breaks.
that glass no longer exists. The glass that you had muchan for Shabbos no longer exists. Now you have material. You have a new matter, which is debris.
Because the matter,
It's not the glass. It's the glass is the what you reserved was a usable glass, and you were able to set it aside because it had a function. Now it no longer has that function,
that's what it's.
and not only that, it has no function. So if you want to do an art project with it, you wouldn't be able to put it aside for Shabbos. You can move it if it was hazardous and you needed that space. Okay? Okay, so now we're on to the second subcategory of Nolad, which is quasi-Nolad, Ke'ein Nolad. It's not true or absolute Nolad. The term Ke'ein Nolad refers to an item that did not evolve anew, but rather is an existing entity that has undergone a minor transition and has assumed a slightly different form or function than before. Can anybody think of a good example?
Broken glass.
Huh?
Broken glass.
Uh-huh. How about
Because
what?
it was the glass itself was there before Shabbos.
So,
Now
so
it
in,
really was because it's
indeed,
not
so
the same.
exactly. So in your case, I want to do an art project now. You had a beautiful vase, which were different colors, but now you don't want to throw it out. Now you feel bad, and the truth is, you're an artist and you could use it for sculpture, right? So now to put it aside, right? It's muksa, and it's nolad, right? Okay, so I think a good example of quasi-nolad would be putting water in an ice tray and putting it in the freezer. The substance existed before Shabbos, but it didn't exist in this form. And you want it specifically in this form because it can't serve the function that you want when it was regular water, but now it's ice. So water coming into ice could be quasi-nolad. That's how you have to think about it.
It's allowed for Sfaradi, I think, to put.
Well,
yes?
I guess,
Ashkenazi
well,
no?
let's see if it's quasi-nolad, and you'll see there's a lot of differences when it comes to this stuff.
It's true. It's something special. That's true. Everybody can see it's changed.
Leah, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have frozen juice in the freezer, and it's not usable to you like that. Now you have a bunch of guests over, and you need to defrost that juice. Are you allowed to? Is it considered nolad because you didn't have usable juice before, and now you have usable juice? Here, let's see. Ke'ein nolad is not a true form of nolad. However, because it is an item that developed a new purpose and use on Yom Tov, it is somewhat similar to Nolad Gamar. A Ke'ein Nolad item consequently lacks the high degree of Muchan required for Yom Tov, and is therefore Muksa on Yom Tov, even though the very same item would not be Muksa on Shabbos. So the nafkamina of quasi-Nolad, he says, is only in regards to Yom Tov. So it couldn't be, I don't know, let's see. Here, a toy that was broken on Shabbos. You have a toy and it breaks, but the separate parts are still usable for entertaining a child as is. So that's not muksa on Shabbos. You know, let's say I have like a wooden, toy or train set that's made out of blocks. And when in its deconstructed form, you can use them as blocks, so the kid will be occupied with the pieces. So therefore, it's functional as is, since it's in its original intended use and set aside was as a functional toy to play with the kids. So even if it breaks on Shabbos, if it's still a functional toy, it's still good. The broken toy and parts are nevertheless muksa on Yom Tov, because in a sense, the toy is an item that has become transformed into something functionally different than before. This situation is therefore somewhat similar to Nolad. So it seems that we have different standards of Nolad in Shabbos or Yom Tov. We have to understand why. It's like somehow, it's a big question. Well, first of all, don't think that, the only way that we are more mekil on Yom Tov than Shabbos is ochel nefesh. And those are drashos that we have. That's gezeres hakosov, right? Asher l'chol nefesh hu levado, right? So we learn out from the psukim, but let's see, okay? There are some notes, fascinating notes in the back that maybe we could check out. Let's see how far we go. Okay, so similarly, if a chair or other furniture became broken, the segments or components are not muksa on Shabbos if they can fulfill another permissible use, like a toy. However, on Yom Tov, these same components would be muksa because their function of use has been changed, and this resembles Nolad. So it seems that we have Nolad problems on Yom Tov if they were set aside, meaning anything that's mukhan for Yom Tov has to be ultimately used for the same purpose that it was set aside. But on Shabbos, if it was good going into Shabbos, somehow, as long as it's functional, it's good. That seems to be the difference, and the question is why? So he says that the principles of Nolad are discussed in section 4 by Yom Tov. So he's going to go into it more then. These are just for the purposes, I guess. By the way, this is the general style of the book. Like, he'll seem to be discussing things, and there will be a lacking of a fundamental understanding. It'll be frustrating, but this is not really where he addresses these things. And he's going to come back to it and discuss it in greater detail. So it's just really for the purposes, he puts a lot of extraneous details in there, but it's really for the purpose of just displaying various categories right now. Okay, so that's Nolad. So we just noted that there's two categories of Nolad. You have total Nolad and quasi-Nolad. Quasi-Nolad is only an issue for some reason that comes up over Yom Tov, and somehow, so those are the two categories. And now we will refer to another concept regarding Hilchot Muksa called basis, which means a base. If you use, meaning the relationship of a particular surface to an item of muksa. A muksa item extends its own status of muksa to any object upon which it was intentionally placed before Shabbos and was left remaining there on Shabbos. The object upon which the muksa item was placed or by which it is supported is called a basis of the muksa item. A basis lidavar, right, ha'aser. So, for example, money left intentionally in a bowl causes the bowl to become muksa even if the money is later removed. You can't use that bowl that contained the money going to Shabbos. Since it was reserved for that, by extension, you can't engage with it on Shabbos. The flame on a candlestick causes the candlestick, the tray beneath the candlestick, and the table to become muksa. However, if the Shabbos challah was placed upon the table on Erev Shabbos, the table is not muksa, because you already designated it for a basis, lidavar, hamutar.
So if you have two items, one mutar, one not, as long as you've got a mutar there, you can use the basis.
Yes, and specifically the custom is to put the challah there because somehow it's something, it's considered davar chashuv. It balance, it's as important to Shabbos as the candles, and therefore it's not, you can't say that this really, it's primarily a base for the candles. Okay? Money deliberately left in a drawer causes the drawer to become a basis of the money and therefore muksa. If the muksa item, meaning that's the classic example of a muksa drawer. If the muksa item is removed from upon the basis, or the basis is somehow removed from beneath the muksa item, the basis remains muksa for the remainder of Shabbos under the principle of migu diiskatsia, explained further below. However, if there are other non-muksa items of greater importance resting on the basis does not become muksa. So the understanding here is that, there's something called migo de iskatsia. Let's see, it's in I. Okay. The principle of migo de iskatzia. Items that were muksa at the onset of Shabbos retain their full muksa status throughout the entire Shabbos, even if what made them muksa changes. Okay, meaning it goes into Shabbos muksa, therefore it's muksa though, even if the defining cause of their muksa status vanishes. The classic case is wet laundry. Wet laundry going into Shabbos renders it not usable on Shabbos, even if over the course of Shabbos it naturally dries. Okay, okay, so we'll talk about it soon. Okay, so remember, in order to alleviate the problems of making a surface, a basis, a base for a muksa item, and therefore by extension prohibits you from using that surface, you must place another item which has at least equal, maybe greater importance. What did we just read? We just read. However, if there are non-muksa items of greater importance resting on the basis does not become muksa. Therefore, according to that explanation, we'll end here, that the challah on the table is of greater importance to the Shabbos or to the human than the lights. Okay, we'll pause here and we'll pick up we're actually in the middle of basis next time.